it's just the middle of August. That's what's going to be going on. Okay, it looks like we're live. Everybody watching, recording, hang on for a minute while I do some housekeeping and get this link posted to the Telegram channel. There we go, I got the link. Telegram channel. Okay. All right, welcome everybody to the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee meeting. Today is August 17th. I'm Chris Troutner. I helped found the Permissionless Software Foundation. It's kind of a light day today in terms of attendance. It's the middle of August, so a lot of people are getting their vacations in while they can. I'm joined with Aaron Shoemaker, who is a regular attendee, though not on camera. Aaron, do you want to just give a brief introduction to yourself and your association with PSF?
Yeah, my name is Aaron Shoemaker. I work with the Permissionless Software Foundation, utilizing a lot of the tech that Chris has built to help integrate it into WebXR, Metaverse, NFTs, that sort of thing, and help find the best way forward to make all that stuff happen and really user-friendly.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, with that, I will share my screen and we'll jump into the agenda here. And then hopefully Stoyan will meet us later, but maybe not. He may be on vacation. So as always, our agendas are posted on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation group under a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee, and we file them all as GitHub issues. And so this is number 37, issue number 37. The scope of these meetings is to cover the technical software that the PSF puts out, which is covered in detail at cachestack.info. Today is going to be pretty short. It's just but I am grateful to have Aaron here because one of the things I did want to go into is this current state of the metaverse and NFTs. And I'm getting more questions from other devs who want to bring NFTs into the metaverse. And there's no better expert I know of than Aaron on that subject.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course, buddy. But real quick, let me give a quick update on the token DEX. That's been a big area of work. I am in the process of wrapping up the Avalanche Labs grant that they gave us last year to build a DEX on their X chain. The work on that is complete, and I'm just in the process of putting together a final report and videos and documentation and getting the software up on the web so that people can interact with it. But there is a back end that allows for selling of tokens trustlessly and atomically. So to recap, trustlessly means you don't have to trust the other party. There's no way that they can screw you or that you can screw them. And atomic means that the trade you either have the money or you have the tokens. Like there is no middle state where things can get stuck. So it either happens or it doesn't happen. It's always in a binary state. And so I was hoping to put a demo together today, but it just didn't get there. So I'll probably have a nice demo and probably a video to point to at our next meeting. I was hoping Stoyan would be here to speak to this, but yeah, he found a bug in the Android wallet that I presented in our last meeting. So I really appreciated him submitting a pull request to fix that bug. And that web wallet has been, I showed off last week that or last meeting 2 weeks ago that it was deployed to Filecoin, but now it's deployed to GitHub pages. And so that should come up a little faster if anybody wants to use it. The link is here in the agenda, but this is what it looks like. And there's one feature in here I wanted to show you, Aaron, once this finishes coming up. I was watching I was watching the Roots Up video that you and Stoyan were doing last week, and you guys kept hitting the refresh button with the token icons. Oh shoot, I don't have any tokens here. Well, anyways, I added a button that comes up. What it does is it lazy loads the token icon. So it loads the tokens as fast as possible with these computer generated icons. And then after it presents it and you're able to interact with it, then it goes and tries to fetch the token icons, and it does that in the background. And so you'll see those icons. And I saw you guys clicking that refresh button thinking that, which was totally natural to think that hitting the refresh button is what is responsible somehow for loading the token icons, and it's not. So what happens now is a button pops up here on the right saying loading token icons, and then it disappears once the token icons have been loaded. So yeah, I really liked watching that Roots Up episode because it just shone a spotlight on this like really kind of serious UI issue. So that's fixed. That'll hopefully be a little more intuitive.
That's what we're here for.
Yep. Kick the tires and break it.
I just reached out to Stoyan. I think he's jumping on.
Oh, okay. Good. Keep an eye out for that.
So I'm gonna jump on my computer now.
Okay.
I got the dog mess cleaned up. So
nice. Okay. Well, good. Well, while you're doing that, the last thing in the agenda that I just wanted to cover. It looks like there's two of you. The last thing in the agenda that I wanted to cover was this sort of roadmap that I've been traveling the last couple of weeks, so I had a chance to think about just sort of what the next couple months hold in store for me. And this is a rough roadmap of where my focus is going to be. Right now, top of the list is completing the Avalanche decks and just getting that wrapped up. And then I've registered the domain name p2wdb.com for the pay to write database. So all the stuff that's out there, like explorer.fullstack.cache, all the code examples, all that stuff that's around the pay to write database, that's all going to get consolidated and live at p2wdb.com. And that's really the big reason for doing that. I mean, other than it's just a good long-term play, is that I want to also focus on the pay to write database pinning service, which we covered in our last meeting, because I'm seeing more and more use cases for that for that service.
Well,
and
did you see Pinata got $24.1 million?
No, I did not see that.
Yeah. And I just thought that was crazy because most of their services are free. And they do have some paid options if you want to have more API requests, which is actually why I started going down the cluster road in the first place, because I was like, there's no way to do a website on IPFS if you're using Pinata for pinning, because you could only have like 3 or 4 people access the site at a time because of their API limit. And then they wanted to jump up to like $10 or $15 a month to have more API requests. And at that point, I was like, well, what is the point of doing that as opposed to putting something up on AWS, which is actually going to be cheaper and combined with a CDN going to be faster. But it does seem like Pinata is very much focused on the NFT side of things, as opposed to creating in my mind, the next layer of web functionality, which is fast and reliable and decentralized websites served up through web IPFS,
Yeah. I've noticed that too. Is like I love Web3.storage as a free service for uploading to Filecoin, but the actual retrieval process is very error prone and slow when it does succeed. And so that is a problem that our decentralized pinning service could solve. Just having multiple distributed network of IPFS nodes around the world, like with the content ready to deploy it upon request.
I did update the IPFS service provider on my server here, so that was the one that had the new pinning service, right?
Well, IPFS service provider has the new IPFS cord library, which is needed. So now we're not using the private IPFS network anymore.
Yeah.
And but there is IPFS dash pay to write database dash service, and that's the pay to write service.
Okay.
You
So I
run
just
that
need to
and
install that one and run it in the
yeah,
Docker.
install that one.
Does it have a Docker
Exactly.
image?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you just go into that production Docker folder, do Docker Compose pull to pull down the images, and then Docker Compose up to run those images.
So I've got the full stack going, and then I have the IPFS service provider going. That's got the new cord library, and then I'm gonna need to get the pay to write IPFS pay to write Docker going for the pinning service.
Yeah, in fact,
and then we'll have another node up on the network.
Yeah, instead of running that, actually, I have the pinning service repository, and I'm going off of memory, so I might be getting this wrong, but I think you can just go same thing, just go into the production Docker, and then and it'll start up the pay to write database for you. So it's really just this one repository. And so
Okay.
same thing, you go in here, and I think I probably have directions. Usage, yeah, right. That's how to write to it. Okay, I don't, but it's the same process where you go into the production Docker folder, Docker Compose pull the images down, and Docker Compose up to run it, and it'll automatically run an instance of Go IPFS, the pay write database, and then this pinning service is a separate Docker container that talks to those two, and then it will respond to commands like this, which is an entry in the pay to write database that tells these pinning services to pin a CID like that.
So do I need to run the IPFS service provider, because I know that runs a Go IPFS node as well? Should I just run the pinning one?
No, you do not need to run the service provider.
So I can shut that down and then run the pinning one instead.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And unless you have the ports like exposed to the internet, you won't actually be like you'll mirror the database and the files, but you won't actually be serving content.
I'll go through and make sure they're exposed.
Yeah, part of the bounty that we're gonna have for people running this is not only to run this software, but to run it as a circuit relay with a V1 or as a V1 circuit relay, so that not only are you replicating the pay to write database and replicating all the pinned contents, you're providing that circuit relay feature to the rest of the PSF network, and you're providing a way for those files to provide those files through the firewalls.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is the sort of the critical magic ingredient in this whole thing. It's not good enough just to download the file. You have to be able to serve the file.
Yeah.
So, Stoyan, welcome. I didn't get a chance to say hey. Welcome to the meeting. I'm glad you could join us.
Thank you.
And thank you for the bug, the pull request for the bug you found in the wallet. That was very appreciated. I covered that shortly before you hopped on.
I will show you something more cool after this.
Perfect.
You're supposed to save that for you Roots Up, Stoyan.
Well, I'm gonna just wrap up this sort of roadmap, and then we'll get into the roundtable discussions. And I'm looking forward to see what Stoyan has to share with us. And then I've got some just sort of metaverse questions that I was hoping Aaron could field.
I'm your man.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, so that covers the pay to write database and the pinning service. And then another feature I want to add to the pay to write database is this ability to pay with Bitcoin Cash only, and not need so that the whoever's providing the access to the pay to write database can essentially sell you a token and burn it for you, in order to do the right, so that the user experience is just more fluid. They don't have to think about PSF tokens. They can just, here's some Bitcoin Cash, like whatever it costs, just write this to the database. And so that'll be a nice feature. I'm noticing that more and more as a pain point as I try and use the pay to write database with different applications. And then I want to fork the pay to write database to the eCash blockchain. This has actually been part of the pay to write database roadmap since the beginning. Is it's intended to run. I would love to have a copy of the pay to write database running on Bitcoin Cash, eCash, and Avalanche. And right now it only exists on Bitcoin Cash. So we'll fork it and bridge it over to the eCash.
This actually has a lot to do with what we're going to get into with the metaverse.
Okay.
Having that functionality of cross-chain storage for metaverse assets is going to be very, very important in cross-compatibility across different platforms, because there are going to be so many different platforms. And just having the ability to say it doesn't necessarily matter which chain you're on, but you can have this functionality. And we'll get into that in the roundtable.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to get into. And then, so the swap protocol is the basic protocol that allows all these dexes that I'm building. This is the secret ingredient that makes them work. Is there's a maker who makes an offer, a taker who creates a counter offer, and then the maker accepts the offer by combining the transaction and broadcasting it. And that's essentially the swap protocol in a nutshell. So I'm going to abstract that and into its own JavaScript library. Currently, that's embedded into these DEX apps, the AVIC DEX and the BCH DEX and the eCash DEX. So I'm going to abstract that process into its own standalone library that these other apps can leverage. And the reason I want to do that is because the next step is I'm going to create an Android app that's a buyer wallet. So this will be based on the web wallet that I just showed at last meeting and a few minutes ago. I'll add that library in there so that a person with just a standalone front end and no back end can bring up the app and shop all the tokens available for sale and buy one, and it's just contained in the front end. I've been thinking about how to do this, and I realized that's possible, that we can just actually embed everything in a front end app from the perspective of the buyer. The seller still needs to run the back end software in order to make offers and in order to accept counter offers. But a buyer who's just producing a counter offer we can just put that all in the front end, and it doesn't actually need a back end component. So that's a pretty big deal. That's going to make the user experience much more in line with what people will expect in terms of, like, download this app, shop for a token, hit the buy button, and now I have my token. Like, that's the kind of user experience that will unlock. So I think that's really important that we achieve.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And then once that is complete, I'll finish forking all the software over to the eCash software, eCash chain, and that will wrap up the grant that we have with the eCash GNC. So about half of all of this infrastructure has already been forked over to eCash. There's already sort of a semi-functional DEX, but it uses the Bitcoin Cash instance of the pay-to-write database, and so that user experience is pretty clunky, and it'll be a lot better once we get the pay-to-write database over on the eCash chain. So this is a pretty tall order. This is going to keep me busy for probably over the winter, and but at the end of it, we'll have a pay-to-write database on multiple chains. We'll have DEXs with good user experiences. Hopefully, more users will be using it, which will generate a cash flow for the Permissionless Software Foundation to fund future development.
Awesome.
So that's the roadmap. We'll see, but that's the agenda. Let's go ahead and jump into the roundtable, because I am really anxious to pick your brains. I'm excited to see what Stoyan wants to share, but let's jump to this last question first. Actually, Aaron, I'm curious, because I just have not, I don't have uh, an Oculus, and I just haven't really been following the space. Is there a non-Facebook metaverse? What do people mean when they use the word metaverse outside the context of Facebook? And what does the compatibility between them look like right now? What's your understanding of it?
Okay, so yes, there is non-Facebook metaverses. Microsoft has a metaverse. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but they've pulled support for it a while ago, but people are still building on it. WebXR would be the main engine driving other metaverses. And what WebXR, it was a standard created by the Kronos Group, who also created WebVR. And XR means cross compatibility, so that you can develop programs that work with headsets, with desktop, with mobile, with AR glasses in the future. And it allows you to work, instead of having to write code for each type of controller and each type of headset, you write code once, and the XR code is able to recognize what headset the person is using, and then allow them to work with that headset. So WebXR is web-based, of course. So it's a difference between being siloed in a platform like Facebook or Meta and Horizon Worlds, and being able to build on a free open platform where you can travel everywhere. I do think this is the future of the metaverse. It's in very early stages, but this is where I think the IPFS cluster networks, like we're talking about, are going to play a major role in that, in two ways. Well, multiple ways, but two main ways. One is I think it will eventually increase speed of resolution of people's worlds, and two, it'll allow for people to own their own worlds, because right now you got a lot of people that are building in Horizons and they don't own anything. They may be pouring in 30, 40, 50 hours to build something that they technically don't own and they can't take out of the world. And there's a promise like down the line that, yeah, you're going to be able to take this out, but they can't. And so with a WebXR experience, you could, but there's a lot of barriers in that. You got to know code, you got to know JavaScript. On top of JavaScript, you got to then know 3JS, but to learn 3JS, you have to have some understanding of 3D rendering, because it uses a camera system and a canvas system, and it uses quaternion coordinate systems, and all, which is like, that's 3D modeling zone, so there's this gap right now where it's like, oh, I'm a really good JavaScript guy, but I don't know anything when it comes to rendering 3D elements, let alone rendering it in the browser, or so like Babylon JS and 3JS are your main web-based browser rendering 3D engines. A lot of people use 3JS.
Babylon JS and
Babylon JS and 3JS. 3JS. A lot of people use them for like 3D websites. These will be like websites where you go to them, and as you scroll, things happen on the screen. But they're also used for VR websites and VR type of applications. Now, Babylon JS did just release Babylon JS 5 in May, which adds full support for what's called Web GPU. So there are two different types of renderers that utilize the browser to access your graphics card. There's WebGL, and WebGL does have a WebGL 2.0 standard. It came out like 3 years ago, but they're still working on it. And then there's WebGPU. WebGPU was developed by Google, and it allows for better access, like higher polygon count, lower resource intensive type of thing. So the issue of making stuff work in the browser is being solved, but then there's the back end issue, which is, where's this being served from? Is this being served from a decentralized location? Are we accessing it through a token? How do we integrate something like MetaMask, or what was a Badger wallet, into a VR experience? I do think there are ways like with IPFS, their JavaScript library, you could create a WebXR app that also fires up an IPFS node, and that IPFS node then pulls in the data for the WebXR app from, say, a cluster network, like we've been talking about. So,
Aaron,
like,
if I can interrupt,
yeah, go ahead.
you explanation is too detailed and too technical. I think Chris was
No, I love it.
asking
Like
the big. No, I think you're asking the big picture question. So, like metaverse is something like pretty much 3D environment which you can customize.
Yep.
The different from the usual games is you cannot introduce new stuff in these games, but metaverse is trying to, you can interact more, create custom objects inside this 3D environment.
Yeah.
And there's several big players in the moment. For NFTs, it's mostly spatial.io. They're allowing it to create like very simple like 3D galleries. More advanced one are Decentraland and Sandbox. These one are the big players in the moment because they allow you to interact with their words from your wallet. So you can introduce NFTs like something inside these environments.
Yeah.
And mostly different between them is what kind of like rendering using, like Aaron mentioned. In Sandbox, it's something named voxels, which is like pixelated characters. And in Decentraland, it's like polygon based mostly. So they allow you a lot of stuff. Like, for example, Decentraland allow you to create something named wearables, which are NFTs, but you can customize your avatar inside the 3D. So you can create like t-shirts, something, and more like objects, like Aaron's specialty. You can create like buildings and stuff like this one. But so this kind of objects, you can introduce them inside. And
nice.
Yeah.
The
and
Sandbox has a
making
voxel
money,
editor too.
Yeah. So people making money creating these custom objects and allowing other people to interact with them. Wear them like wearables or land. You can have like buildings there and you can make concerts, events, stuff like this one.
It is important to note that like Sandbox and Decentraland, neither are VR enabled. So neither of them do you put on a headset and explore the world. Like say a Horizon Worlds or PlayStation had their Dreams platform, which is a pretty spectacular feat of engineering from what I've been told by people that have used it, like to the point where you can build things by flicking your wrist to get to different tool sets, you know, and they really planned that out. But where PlayStation kind of failed was in the shareable experience, where you know what Meta is doing is they're trying to do share first, build later. You know, we want it to be a social aspect. Decentraland has the shareable thing going on with it. It's not VR enabled. We were talking a little bit before the show about how there's no standard right now. So like, for instance, Sandbox, in order to get one of my assets into Sandbox, I had to shrink it incredibly small because they have a limit of like, I don't know, 10 megabytes, right? And so that means incredibly small assets, whereas your traditional 3D assets are, you know, hundreds of megabytes. So like you're talking about really shrinking down the fidelity of the asset. And like Storian was saying, it's voxel based, so it's very blocky. Think Minecraft. Decentraland is a little bit different. So they're all kind of calling themselves metaverses. They're not all connected. It's a little bit of a wild west.
Yeah.
But
so
go ahead.
You said that a lot of these platforms, they don't work with the headset, but are there any that do? Like other than like if like so you buy, and I'm asking this out of complete ignorance. So my understanding is you buy an Oculus from Meta and and yeah, you probably maybe have to buy or download Horizon Worlds, and that's the thing that everybody raves about. Is like, is WebXR something that you can load onto the headset?
You don't even have to load it. You go to it in your browser. So you can open up an Oculus browser, or you can download what's called Wolvik, which is the team that took over the Firefox Reality program, because Firefox said we're done with it, and Wolvik's like, we'll take it on. So those are your two browser options right now. And then you can go to different WebXR experiences, and this is a solution we're trying to work on so that people have better access to these WebXR solutions, easier access to them. And some of them are games, some are like, there's a Zesty Market, which I forget the name of the guy that runs it, but we've had a lot of conversations. They use Polygon actually, and they allow people to put NFT advertisements to rent. They put billboards in these games with these developers that are tied to Polygon NFT contracts, and they allow you to rent space within the WebXR experience to advertise other WebXR experiences. And you as an owner can decide whether or not you want to have that advertisement in your space or not. Like you get a choice. It's not just like Facebook where like it doesn't matter what you can advertise.
Yeah, the central one also is on Polygon. So it seems this is the
Sandbox as well.
Yeah, it's now the on-the-go platform for this kind of assets.
So I've had an uptick in particularly young developers who they're like, okay, I want to get involved with the metaverse and I want to get involved with crypto. And they want to explore the intersection of those two things. So it sounds like if you're a new developer with limited experience, probably the path of least resistance to get something that you can build and then share with somebody would be the Oculus. And then there's a web browser that can launch WebXR. So you can do your development outside of that in a normal computer environment and simulate everything with the web browser, but then experience it, in 3D with the headset.
Yeah.
And then you're basically just working in a web environment at that point.
If you are JavaScript based, I would suggest 3JS and Babylon.js. But before you go into that, I would also suggest that you get familiar with how a 3D environment works, how ambient lighting works, how meshes work, how shaders work and reflect light, because when you're programming in 3JS, you are literally programming, I want the light to be position X, and I'm in a sphere, so I have, and they deal with radians instead of degrees. So you have to understand the difference between how to convert degrees to radians to say, okay, I want the light here. Whereas like a Unity editor, if you're into C#, that may be better for you because you can literally click and drag the light to where you want it. So that's one of the problems if you're going with WebXR faces, is that you don't have that graphical user interface like you do with Unity. And so, but Unity doesn't have as good web XR support. You can export in a WebGL. They don't have WebGPU right now. They're much more for standalone applications. So you're going to create an application. You're probably not going to get it in the Oculus store, but you could get it uploaded to Steam or SideQuest. And then people can access that through Steam or through SideQuest. That accessing applications is a whole nother mixed bag in the metaverse right now. You have the Oculus store, you have SideQuest, which tends to be side-loading applications, and then you have Steam, which is run by Valve, and they're really making, even though they're in VR, they're making a big push with their Steam Deck and the new Steam OS operating system, which is a Linux-based operating system that they're hoping in 3 to 4 years is going to overtake Windows, essentially. So,
but if he's just starting, you're talking now about the shading and stuff like this one, but it's for creating the scenes and stuff like more complicated. He can just start with Blender, creating some objects like t-shirt or I don't know, something simple, trying to sell them to the people and make some money. So
That's
they can
true.
use them in the
Blender is-
metaverse like wearables.
Blender is
And,
free.
Yeah.
So like creating an asset, you can create an asset in Blender. You want to have a GLB, which is the JPEG of the 3D world. It's a lightweight. It's a container. So like the actual file is called a GLTIFF, but the container has the UV map in it, which just tells the computer how am I going to lay the colors over this object, and it's got the mesh. So it was created because like 3D workers would send the mesh, but then they forget to send the UV, and then their partner would be like, I can't do anything with this. So they created a container so you can just send both. Then it's about, well, where do you upload that to? Do you upload that to a centralized server like AWS or Oracle, or do you upload that to IPFS? And then if you upload that to IPFS, you have the question of how do you change things about the object? Say you take it into a game and the game says, these are the physics for this game, and it writes to a JSON and says, all right, for this particular object, these are the physics, and you played X amount, and maybe you've gained experience, and so it's adjusted. So now I've made an addendum, and I've written to an object this addendum, so that when you come back to the game, you're not starting from square one, or if you go to another game and maybe they're sharing the same physics and the same parameters, because there's going to start to become a worldwide standard of like, if you have an asset and it's a baseball bat, it's got this amount of hit points and this and this and this. That'll start.
It's like building the internet all over again.
Yeah,
but even more intense because now we're trying to simulate physics.
Yep. Yeah, and so you need a way to write to that, but that's where mutable tokens come in. You know, that's why I'm very interested in what the PSF is doing, and I'm interested in mutable token data, because you could create a token and then allow writing of data to a mutable token that rides like a sidecar, you know, for this token.
Well, I'm really encouraged to hear this WebXR as that's built on top of the web technology. That seems to me like, I don't know, from my perspective, it's like, why would you do it any other way? Why would you even bother building a walled garden? Because of course that's going to overtake anything at this point. If like there's so much stuff on the web, if you can bring even a fraction of that into the headset, that's just a torrent of value there.
Yeah, everything is available. It's just we're also in this spot where what is created by people that are very used to looking at a 2D screen. So we haven't even switched over to the 3D mindset yet, to where you come to a website and it's a scrolling list of things instead of being a spatial world where you get to explore. Like a good example is your game library should be an arcade. And you walk into the arcade and you maybe pull a cartridge from the wall, and then you put that cartridge into your video game player, and that's how you load the game. But right now it's very much like a computer where you scroll through a list, you click on the list, and then you upload the game experience. So even the UI is still based in our 2D world, but we're shifting. We're starting to understand, okay, we need 3D stuff in this, and how do we make that happen, and how do we make that persistent across worlds? And that, like, this goes back to the cluster network, where I think the value in the long run of a cluster network is going to be in that if you create a WebXR experience and it is an IPFS based experience, well, that world is saved to your IPFS node. If you want it to be accessible by more people, you could pay to pin it. And now that world is accessible to more people. But this also creates a way that we can create a persistent metaverse that is not localized on a server, but is on everybody else's devices, where we're sharing this experience. and it can lower the cost. And I think my theory is that as the cluster network gets larger, the speed of resolution is also going to increase. So this could be the underlying layer for how the mechanics of the metaverse works.
Yeah. Well, you know what this reminds me of is there was a short period of time where the term mashup became really popular. This was like late 90s. And this was pre like copyright enforcement. This was pre DCM. I think it was a response to this is why the digital DCMCI Digital Millennium Copyright Law, or I can't remember what the acronym was, but there was just this explosion in artistry where people would they'd find a piece of music that they liked, they would download it in MP3 format, they would mash it up and add their own little thing to it, and then put it out there and share it, and then somebody else would like it and they'd take it and they'd add something to it, and it was just this explosion of creativity because no one was hindered by, like, the tech there was there to share everything and to edit everything, and there was no digital rights management, there was no worry about copyright. It was this became such a powerful thing. This is what got people on the internet. I mean, from my personal perspective, it was like, this is what got, it was because like email had been around and that didn't really do anything, and then like really simple websites were around and people were like, I don't really get it. But then people started sharing art. They started sharing pictures and movies and images, and people took whatever they found and they edited it and added their own thing and shared that. And it was like this beautiful creative thing. But then the record labels got freaked out and they started lobbying Congress, and we got the digital millennial copyright, the DCMCIA takedown notices and whatever. That became a thing. And all of this creative like explosion came to a halt.
Yeah.
And Napster, when it went after Napster, and then it's been this cat and mouse game ever since. So it's what I'm hearing. I like what I'm hearing because if the same sort of mashup mentality persists, and we have a layer like IPFS, and a way to do payments and a way to uncensorably share content, so that people who just don't care about copyright and don't want to even deal with it can just be creative and do so, anonymously. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see what the reality lies, but it sounds like maybe we're in a better place to sustain that creativity explosion and that innovation. I don't know. I hope.
I would agree. And the nice thing about WebXR that makes it different than like Horizons, like Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call them, they're going to make it so that you can live stream to your Facebook page. But that doesn't mean that somebody on a mobile device or a desktop device can interact with you in the environment. Whereas with WebXR, it's completely different. You can interact with me on a headset, on a computer, on a mobile device, even on your TV, So it's actually opens up that walled garden even more because lots of people can interact. And if we can successfully create a way to build persistence on something like an IPFS network, where you can, and that's where I got to write this paper. The idea of transient data fields comes into play, where some data that is more popular will persist longer on a network, and then as popularity fades away, the data can actually recede and basically recede back to its seed nodes. So like if you build a world and it's immensely popular, you're not penalized by a CDN when you're running through a IPFS cluster network, because everybody that visits that place for 24 hours is going to also be seeding that content. So if you have thousands and thousands of people seeding it, you may only need to pin it 4 or 5 times around the world, but because you have such a high volume of people wanting to visit that experience, it naturally propagates itself and makes itself faster. And when people stop wanting to visit that experience, it'll just recede back to your nodes, and you're paying only the pinning cost of the nodes. So it allows young developers to actually expand faster than they would in the traditional cloud model if done right.
Right, if done right. Yeah. I can kind of see how like some of the design principles you need for that, like an offline first mentality, where like you're basically your app, it's not going out to a server, it's trying to render everything locally, which is much faster. And if it needs an asset that doesn't have, then it goes out to the IPFS network to retrieve it.
Yeah.
And so as the experience gets more and more intense, your computer's like pulling more and more data from the IPFS network, but simultaneously sharing it with other people who need that data, and just generally increasing the availability of the popular data.
And
but everything's essentially being rendered locally. I think that would have to be done to be for performance reasons. Something
Google just released is a cloud-based GPU rendering for augmented reality assets. So you can render high assets from a cloud base, which is great and makes a lot of sense. Now, if we can make that in a decentralized manner, I've got a couple 3090s in my computer over here. When my computer's not being used, wouldn't it be nice that I could put my GPU up on a marketplace and be part of a decentralized rendering system for people that are on a mobile device? Right? And so Google's doing it in a centralized way. Doesn't mean it can't be done in a decentralized way in the future. But in my mind, if you're going to have this large volume of people, having these giant server centers is not going to cut it for the amount of information that is going to be needed. It's going to have to be a peer-to-peer network like we're talking about. And that's where IPFS cluster network come into play. That's where decentralized GPU rendering comes into play. And when you're talking about assets, which a lot of people are wondering about, like NFT assets, bringing those into a world, well, it's not super difficult. People have already solved the problem with like MetaMask and Polygon and Ethereum assets of bringing those into like a WebXR experience. The problem is, how do those then interact within the world? And what is our solution? Is our solution we're going to sell 5 NFT objects that can be used within the game, but they're already preloaded in the game, and having the NFT only gives you access to the preloaded asset, so you're not actually drawing in a data file from the network to use in the game? Or is it going to be that you log into the game and you actually do import that 3D asset into your browser and render it right there in the browser, and then the game assigns attributes to that 3D asset? Those are two different ways of handling the same question.
Right. Yeah, and those will set the context for everything else. Well, this has been really educational for me. I want to make sure we save some time for Stoyan to show us whatever it is he wanted to show us.
Yeah, sorry for talking too much, Stoyan. I'm getting too technical.
I love it. I love that we basically I now have an answer when devs ask me how to get started in the metaverse and crypto. I can say, check out WebXR, Babylon.js, and 3JS. Start there.
And send them my way too, because we are looking for WebXR developers, and we want to promote them, and we want to work with them to build different WebXR experiences.
Cool. Yeah, I'll keep tagging you on Twitter.
Sounds good.
Well, yeah, Stoyan, here, let me turn on sharing. And what do you got for us today?
So, can you see this thing?
Yeah.
Do you remember I talked many times about this scaffold ETH?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is like environment to create, to fastly prototype blockchain related applications. So all of these visible components are different React components, separate, so you can easily combine them. So during my vacation of 3 or 4 days last week, I got the Chris wallet source, and I created the same thing, but for BCH. So let me show you the magic. So first, to set the goals, I don't try to only rewrite the Chris software because it's working. It's a working product, but I needed a platform, something that I can customize very easy. Like I can just use this component to show balance or to show address. So this was the main goal, to have like very customizable environment. And the second goal was to fix the Chris old style of programming. You're using too much component did mount and something. It's not use it anymore. It's like mostly now like functional components, not the class based, and pretty much everything is
that.
Yeah, it's everything is hooks. So hook for everything. So I tried to make this one, and here's the end result. So it's the wallet, but see, you can have model window for wallet. You can show QR code. You can have scanner here.
Nice.
And this everything is this address. You can switch SOP. This is different one component.
Okay.
Scanner plus this is another component. Here you can switch between USD BCH. This is also separate component. So yeah, and this is component. In fact, here is something ready. You can see I can have several pages, but I can have wallets, application level wallets.
Yeah.
You can also change to night vision. See this one. So it pretty much have already the whole functionality of the Chris wallet. Everything is working, switching the servers, these things. And I also change a little state. So in the moment, if you can see, it does not reloading. So it's keeping, you are talking, we need to keep most of the state on the front end. It's now does not connecting the server at all, but you can reload and then it will get the new balance from the server. In the same way you've done this on this Android application. And today I've done also the tokens. And see, they are independent. Like this one is on IPFF, so it's a little late to load, but I can reload and it will get again the token list, but it's keeping the same, like with your code, it's keeping the tokens on the server. That's why this is so fast.
So this is interesting to me, and I hadn't really. One of the big challenges in an application like this is that the wallet, the wallet is a library and it has its own state and independent from any of the visual components. And then the visual components, they may or may not have state, but they're everything with the GUI is essentially reflecting some part of the state of the wallet. And then you have the whole backend thing where it's like, oh, I need to update my UTXOs, or I'm going to spend something and then I need to update balance, or maybe somebody just sent me something and the app doesn't not aware of that. So so like for instance with the address component where you were showing that switching between back and forth, like it's got to get that address information from the wallet. So there's this whole process of there's like a workflow, right? So like first you got to load the wallet, then you got to go out and get, hydrate the wallet with information from the blockchain. And then the visual components can interact with the wallet. Like now they know what the address is that they're supposed to display. And so I kind of get lost in this idea of trying to make self-contained React components that have a dependency on the wallet. Like for instance, like that component can't really be a standalone component because the very first thing it needs is to be told what address it needs to be displayed.
Okay, let me show you some source so you can see. So now how my applications looks like. This is the whole application. See, use connect wallet. There is a hook. So every time you open the application with this hook, it will do the whole job for you. So it will connect to the backend. It will get the servers and balance and everything. And it will keep it in a application level storage. This guy. So I have there the wallets in this storage. So from any component, I can get it from here. This it's with this library, pool state. It's the easiest. Yeah, you don't need to do Redux on stuff like this one. It was the easiest global state library that I found. So inside my components, I can just get everything from this storage with just one command. So my hook, when I connect the application, it's connecting to the backend. And also I think first you've done with this load scripts, it's loading the minimal SOP wallet in the DOM model. And this guy, this hook is putting everything inside in the global store. And now every component, you can send the state to it by some properties, props.
Okay.
So for example, I can just send when I want to display the address. See the address, I can give him the wallet property, and it will get the address from there. Or in this case, I can have several wallets. I'm not sure if I can do this, but I can display address for several wallets. Just send the wallet like a parameter. Or you can do this by communicating with this global store and get something from there. So I include it like this one. And let me see. And I update this global storage when balance is changing. So it's keeping everything in one place. And the other components can get after this the balance from this global store. So
cool. Okay.
Everything, and I have hooks for everything. So even the people which are not using the same React framework, like I'm using for this not React Bootstrap, but another one named AntD. I just wanted to have one more stuff, but inside your, for example, Dex application, you can use just this hook. Use GIST servers. So with this line, it will get the servers from the GIST GitHub GIST that you was telling us, and it will keep this list inside the global storage so the other components can get it. Or this is how I'm loading the lazy loading of the icons. So you just give it the token, and it will go and get everything from somewhere, IPFS or something, but it will not slow down the other part of the applications because this is the separate component. This is this my token card component. So see, I'm using these hooks here, like use load icon, and this line will start loading, but the other codes will just show.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
is this so? This is in your. This is Eva. This code's in your repository or in your GitHub.
I will put it maybe there, but I'm not sure how to make some money from this because I spend a lot.
I just like to study your code. If I like this seems like I need to sit down and really study this.
For
and
you,
I could
it's
probably
free.
learn a few things.
No, for
right
you
on.
it will be free. I will give it to you, no problems. But I was thinking, how can I like set some like profits from this, because it took me a very long time, like 30 hours or something, and I will need to work more on this because there's still some missing parts. But it's going pretty well. It's now have all of these like separate small components. See how many of them, like address,
Yeah.
just inputting the address, like balance, like
Yeah.
resetting
Yeah.
the wallet.
This is why I need to study it, because like
Yeah.
I don't fully understand what you mean when you say certain things, but I will if I study the code. And because yeah, I can see that you've got an idea here, and I really want to explore it. I am not a front end developer. That is definitely I've consciously chosen that is outside my expertise. So I definitely am open to learning more from people who know more than I do.
If I create a private PCF repository, you will be able to see it, right? Because you're part of the PSF.
Yeah. Anybody in the PSF group should be able to,
maybe I will
look
do
at
this
it. Yeah.
because it's free for PSF members. If somebody else wants to see it, he needs to buy some PSF tokens.
Yeah, I love that idea. I also like the idea of like, yeah, if we could come up with some business model around building React components, that would be great. I'm not really sure how to approach something like that, but I like the idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure because
I've got some
everybody
ideas
can
for you
create this.
guys. So you were talking earlier about integrating blockchain into like the metaverse. Well, as people build WebXR, we are going to need to solve the login problem. And what I call the login problem is people are getting tired of logging in to every experience. So it would be much nicer to have something like a wallet in which you have your keys, and that is your login across many different WebXR platforms. But that means that me as a WebXR developer, I need some way of creating a React wallet that I can drop in and allow people to engage with or import their seed phrase, or on a connection needs to be made for like the Wolvik browser or the Oculus browser to where we can have a plugin extension of a JavaScript wallet like this. And now we can, as a dev, I can either just build a wallet program into my functionality of my game, so that this is something where you can go connect your wallet or anything like that, or I can, or it's built on a global platform like a Wolvik platform where people are like, well, I'm going to use Wolvik browser. I'm going to dev on it because I can use Stoyan's plug and play wallet assets to build my extensions for my game. Because we're going to need some way to connect the wallet to the browser within the VR headset so we can bring in assets. That problem has not been solved yet. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Not that that's the solution.
No, you're right. Like there's a thread that connects all these things. It's like a browser extension would be a great way to do this, but you have to make assumptions about how the user is going to use it, and that's why like building a standalone app is sort of where everything's integrated and you have control of 100% of the experience. Like that might be an easier way to start, but it's not going to scale. We need some better way of composing all these components, sort of on a use case by use case basis. So there's, everything's a trade-off. So I really, you're right. They're all connected.
Yeah. It's just we don't know how to connect them yet. Totally. I can see a through line. I could see it to where I'm developing a WebXR app and I buy Stoyan's code to stick it in my app. So this is literally your login. But your login is basically your wallet, and it functions as a browser wallet like this would function. The app itself doesn't have access to the private keys or anything, but it just brings in all your information, and your save data could even be created this way. Because me as an app, I could create a mutable token that represents your save data, and I just deposit that into your wallet. And when you leave the game, you don't even have to store that stuff in your cache anymore. that stuff is just stored with that save token. And when you log back into the game's going to look and go, oh, you have a save token from Aaron's WebXR experience. Would you like to start where you left off? Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's similar to a cookie. The way that like you visit a website and they give you a cookie, and it's like the cookie lives on your computer, but the cookie is a place for that web app to store your information. In the similar way, a game could give you a token, but retain the key that lets them update the mutable data. So the next time you log into that game, you're like, here's my token. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they can look it up. And it's the same concept as a token, just brought into the crypto token, or same idea as a cookie, but brought into the crypto token.
This is why I favor BCH and eCash for this type of tokenization, because it is a lot cheaper to do this on BCH than eCash. If I have a 10,000 person user base and it's costing me 10 cents a Polygon token, and then it's costing me 6 cents every time I want to update it, that's not going to work. But if I'm using BCH and it costs me 1/10 of a cent, every time, that can work. That is feasible. And it's the same with NFT assets. If I'm creating NFT assets on BCH, it is much cheaper, because we're going to move from this one-off NFT to I'm producing an environment experience. I need 10,000 NFTs. I'm a museum, and when you come to my museum in a WebXR experience, I want to give you a digital souvenir. Well, I don't want to pay $30,000 in fees to be able to give you that souvenir. I want to pay like literally 1/10 of a cent and mint up 100,000 of them. And then it costs me 1/10 of a cent every time you come there, and it says, hey, you got your wallet, and enter your wallet address, and boom, like the program kicks you a digital NFT. And it could be a 3D object that is contained in the museum. And so people are like, oh, this is a really cool thing. And as people, because this is going to move from just solo like WebXR experiences to your Facebook, LinkedIn, all this stuff will be a 3D experience. So when you go to a museum and you get that digital souvenir, you're going to put it in your digital home to display to people, right? So this stuff will become something that people want to use. But the cheaper chains, not cheap as in made cheap, but the cheaper costing chains like BCH and eCash make a ton of sense for that sort of thing. You add the DEX on top of that, and now you can have people creating and selling these token assets in a decentralized exchange, using it on a world that is persistent and built on top of IPFS.
Yeah, it's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
To go back, so Sorian, to go back to what you were showing us with the components. So the way that I've been developing that web wallet is there's the base repository, which is just it has nothing to do with the Android compatibility. It's just the basic React components that make the web wallet. And then I forked it. There's a fork that adds all the capacitor.js libraries to build it as an Android app. And then I forked that, and I'm building the Avalanche DEX and another fork for the Bitcoin Cash DEX. And so the idea is like, if there's a good idea in that base, in that first layer, that first repository, like what you're presenting, Stoyan, like if we can find a better way to just simply organize the React components, we can make the changes at that repository and then pull the changes up into all the application specific repositories. And so that's why I very much would like to study your code and see if there's just a better way for us to structure things. And then because of the way the repositories are laid out, it's just a couple git commands to then pull all those changes into all the other application specific things. And now I'm starting to think like, well, maybe so I have the first repository, which is just the basic web app. The second repository, which adds all the Android specific libraries for making an Android app. Maybe we need to have a second layer repository that takes the basic web app and turns it into a browser or a browser extension. Like Sam is, this is where we can tap Sam because he has more experience with this, so that we can have an Android app and we can have a browser extension and we can have an embedded wallet that's a web app. But if we have a good way of representing things as components, that should be pretty easy to maintain. Like in theory, it's the practice where things fall apart.
We can try. I will put the code after this meeting or maybe tomorrow, and you can see it.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'd like to study it.
Stoyan, you are the man as always.
You're a very good programmer. I learn a lot by reading your code.
He was like, yeah, I'm like Chris on vacation.
Yeah.
I do too much work.
Well, I know it's like I spent the last 2 weeks just focused on the Avalanche decks, and so it's like I don't really have much to share because all my effort was like focused on one thing. But it's when I go on vacation, I'm like, oh, I'll mess with this for like an hour. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fun, and then I'll move on to something else. So
Yeah,
then I have lots of things to share.
Yeah, but last week there was like a big holiday in Japan, like it's named Obon. So, but we don't have anything to go. So I was home alone all the day. And when I starting doing this stuff, it's becoming like a long marathon, like 10 hours coding or something. So, yeah.
Nice.
I think it's awesome, Stoyan. I love the React components, and I gotta dive into the React side for some of the Web3 stuff or WebXR stuff, because they even have stuff where you can add stuff, but I'm pretty sure they're just making components out of like the 3JS and Babylon JS libraries. Don't hold me to it. I haven't looked too far into it, but we just need simple functionalities to where you can go to a site and be like, are you PC based or are you headset based? And here's apps that work for you. Like even that's not around right now. And that's how early this is. It's kind of like when you would go to before websites got optimized for mobile, and it was like,
well, that's what I'm thinking of is like we still don't have like a ubiquitous, like if you look at the way the web works, like if you stick to just the most vanilla standards as you can build like say a React app that will work on every browser, and you don't have to do a lot of browser testing, and that's kind of a new thing. But then you take a step over into like the native app space, and there's still a lot of just like there's a ton of different ways you can do it. There's a bunch of trade-offs to each way. There's all these app stores, and then there are walled gardens, and then there's alternative app stores because nobody likes a walled garden. And so it's just like way more fragmented when you go from web to native apps. And then so now I'm seeing like the headset thing is like back into like the early 90s of web tech, where it's just like there is no standard. Everybody's just playing jazz.
Yeah, it really is. And then you have to, you'll be like, oh, it doesn't work on this headset, or this doesn't work here, or oh, that controller set is different. Yeah. Oh, it's literally like the button mapping system is different on every controller. And people are like, well, we want to have a touchpad and we want to have a joystick. And well, the touchpad has a different control parameter necessarily than a joystick. Maybe we can kind of make it so that it works, So it is very much like that. And it's like when I dev for this stuff, I'm putting on a headset. I'm like, okay, it works in the headset. Now let's look at mobile. Oh, mobile looks like crap. Like I gotta redo the mobile side of things. Okay, does it work on the desktop? All right, it's working on here, but oh, the link's not coming up on mobile. Why is it not coming up on the mobile side? But I do get the feeling too that a lot of people are getting sick of apps and wanting to go more to a web-based experience. But then I think that's where there's the login problem. People are also sick of logging in. Yeah.
Well, that's where a browser extension makes a lot of sense, because your login credentials can be in the extension so that you can go visit at some random website. And then, I mean, it really, like, that was the thing when I was part of the Badger Wallet team. that was the thing beyond every other thing that we nailed is people loved it. You could just go, there was a period of time where there was a couple dozen different web apps that you could just go and you would automatically be logged in because you had your Badger wallet extension.
Yeah.
And you got to skip that entire thing. Like the whole login account creation process, like just didn't even exist. You just went right past it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely needed. A lot of these WebXR apps, it's nice because you don't have to log in, but having some sort of browser extension to where that would count as your login, say it's an arcade type of game and you get the high score. Well, the high score could travel with you and somebody could identify you by your wallet. Chris Troutner has the high score in, Space Blasters or whatever. Yeah, just people like that sort of thing. So we need a way to do that without enter your email address and enter yet another password and write it down in your password book and forget about it. And then when you come back to log in, get your password book out and start going through what you think it might have been when you set that password.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that somebody figured that naming this thing wallet from the beginning was a bad idea because in fact there's no coins inside. They're on the blockchain. But it's difficult to explain to the people that if you lose your wallet, still coins on the blockchain. So from the beginning, it should be named like key holder or something. So,
that's a really good point. That like maybe the browser extension doesn't have anything to do with the blockchain. Maybe it just simply makes a key pair. And that's it, because that would solve the login problem. That's the minimum amount of thing you need. And then you don't need to worry about a backend server. You don't need to worry about how is this person going to talk to the blockchain? What country are they in?
That's true because the web app could take care of that. As long as they have the key pair and they come to something like a site using Stoyan's web app, like when they come, it will look for what is the key pair and then load that up. And as long as that's secure in a browser and nothing's getting stolen, then they're golden.
Yeah, because the generating a key pair and then signing messages to prove that like you own an address, that's all done offline. There is no online component to that. So that can all be done within the browser without any sort of need to call a backend server.
Yeah.
So that's something, and that's where that I think convenience comes from. It's the fact that everything can be done locally.
Yeah, and if you want to have that functionality, maybe you got Stoyan site or your Web3 wallet, which you can go to. But as those get built into apps, if people are using everybody that's say 10 WebXR apps are built and they all use Stoyan's React to plug in how they want their stuff. Maybe they don't want all the tokens shown. Maybe they don't want, a buy and send functionality. Maybe this is just what they want. That's cool. But the fact that it would look similar from place to place, the end user would think that it is, and they would simply be responsible for their key pair, which is a browser extension that would log them in, and then they could have access through the WebXR apps and people who are developing that choosing the functionality they want the wallet to have. Maybe they want it open to a marketplace, and so, okay, we're going to have a marketplace that's open, and our particular app, we're going to take, 1% of every sale, and so you can sell through our app, and we're going to use the DEX, but we're going to be your way to use the back end DEX, right? Because you were saying right now you got to use it from a command line. So maybe I, as a developer, take, Stoyan's wallet, but I also hook it up to the back end of the sales, right? And I've made a small little marketplace for my game. People are creating assets in the game, and then they can go to their wallet. They can easily list it for sale, and then people can accept the offer right there. Also, somebody else could create another DEX, and because you have the keys, you could go to that DEX and you could sell other stuff. Maybe you want to buy an asset from another game, and that first game is just about marketplace for their assets. Great. You go to this other DEX and you can buy from World of Warcraft or Call of Duty or whatever, or Fortnite, you know. And so now you open all of this stuff, but again, it's just your browser extension, and they've created the wallet lives in the WebXR app and the DEX, and then you use your keys, you interact with how you want to interact. Anyways, I'm rambling. So.
Well, yeah, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Yeah, I'm really excited to study Storian's code. I think this discussion around key pairs and possibly a browser extension and getting past the sign-on, I think there's some there. I think we should continue the conversation. And I am a lot more educated on how to approach the metaverse and how to advise junior developers on how to approach the intersection of metaverse and cryptocurrency. So that's good.
Yeah.
So I've definitely achieved my goal for this meeting.
All right. And any more questions you have, kick them my way. You know, I'm still learning too. A lot of this stuff is like theory of like how we can do it. And I see a lot of the stuff that you already created with the PSF as being fundamental. They can be fundamental building blocks to an open and decentralized metaverse, which is my end goal. So
yeah. I think that this DEX is going to be a linchpin to a lot of things with what you're doing with the metaverse stuff and what Launchpad IP is doing with the ability with the intellectual property and downloads. Having a really smooth experience with the DEX is going to enable a lot of other use cases. Sorry, Storian, I cut you off.
No, just wanted to ask, is there some changes on the multi-sig problems? Like, are we ready there with everything?
We're ready-ish. The code is, in terms of like there's nothing else to research. There's nothing else to there's no technical questions to answer. They've all been answered. And so the work that's left to do is basically to I have what is it? PSF multi-sig wallet or something. That's the name of the repository. It's a fork of the PSF BCH wallet repository, and it has the first version of the multi-sig, which sucks. And so I need to take those multi-sig examples and refactor that app, use the better multi-sig stuff. And then that's all that needs to happen for us to create a minting council. So I shared that roadmap, and I think that at the end of that roadmap, once we have a pay-to-write database and DEXs working on both eCash, Avalanche, and BCH, I think at that point, that's when it's going to be time to get real serious about the minting council, because we'll have, hopefully the beginnings of a cash flow trickling in from the pay-to-write database, and a reason to use the pay-to-write database, which is the DEXs. And so the council will be in charge of essentially, it'll handle all the things that we need a centralized party to handle that we can't safely handle without, say, a legal entity or something. So that's sort of, so basically the roadmap that I presented, the very last bullet point, which wasn't there, would be like refactor the multi-sig wallet and kick off the minting council. And because at that point, we're also going to have multiple PSF tokens. Like, we're going to have a PSF token on eCash, and I want the minting council to be in charge of that key. And we're going to have the PSF token on BCH. I want the minting council in charge of that key. We're going to have the token liquidity app's going to be very different, because it's just going to be a back-end version of the DEX. And so I want the minting council to have like remote control of that, to be able to shut it down in an emergency and drain the funds from it. And we're going to need that on multiple chains. And so nothing new right now, but very much an important piece of our organization.
By the way, did you hear about Doge Chain?
Doge Chain?
Yeah, you don't know?
No.
Somebody they forked, I think, the Bitcoin and make a different chain where you can pay the fees with your Doge coins, and it's now it's now like surpassed already the smart BCH nodes and everything. Like
No way.
the number of wallets are even bigger now than smart BCH. So
is it an EVM chain and you pay
I
with
don't
Doge
think-
for
I
the gas
tried-
fees?
I found about it before like 2 or 3 hours. So from my
Oh.
research, it seems a Bitcoin based. So, but yeah, but in fact, Dogecoin is just usual token on EVM. So still researching, maybe
Yeah.
until next meeting. But it was just like funny fact. There will be, but I was thinking because they're expecting now a lot of meme coins to make their own blockchains and just play around there. Like Ape Coin
Yeah,
also.
Bored Apes are doing that. Bored
Yeah.
Apes are creating their own blockchain.
So it makes sense maybe to have PCF chain, PSF.
Well,
chain.
I've actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about this, and it makes sense if Bitcoin Cash goes above $1,000. That's a point where it makes sense for us to have our own chain, because tokens, just tokens in general, doesn't matter what chain you're talking about, just the concept of tokens, they depend on the microtransaction use case. If you can't do microtransactions, you can't do tokens effectively. And this is the problem that Ethereum had. Ethereum went up, and like all the tokens, like they had like 2 years there where it was just mayhem with their whole token economy. And that's what allowed Bitcoin Cash to sort of launch tokens on there. And then, that execution wasn't very good. Now you're starting to see a lot of blockchains that have tokens that do have, that are keeping their transaction fees below 25 cents. There is no like definitive threshold where there's no definition of a microtransaction. It just gets worse. The experience gets worse and worse as the transaction fees go up. And so if Bitcoin Cash went to a value of $1,000 per coin, that would make transaction fees, I think, 1 penny. And that's kind of my threshold for microtransactions. If you go above, like a penny is just sort of, it's very subjective, but that's my personal cutoff point. And so if it costs a penny to do a token transaction, and by a token transaction, I'm talking about like computer to computer transactions and like all these use cases we've talked about with mutable data. We need those to be extremely cheap. And so at that point, it would make sense for us to build our own side chain that anchors itself like once a day into the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, but allows us to move all of our token transactions to the side chain. And thereby guarantee, that a transaction is going to be like a fraction of a penny, and have total control over that. And that's exactly what you're seeing. Like that's exactly the logic that the Bored Ape Yacht Club is following. That's why they're creating their own blockchain, or at least, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but in general, that's the logic of what like a lot of these. If it's not like a joke or like an experiment, then it's usually an attempt to reduce transaction fees.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, it's been an hour and a half. I really appreciate you guys making the time. This went on longer than I expected, but we covered a lot of good ground. So thank you for attending.
Stoyan's the one burning the midnight oil over there. So
Yeah.
We'll see you Friday for Roots Up, Stoyan.
Okay.
Does
See you then.
that work for you?
Yes.
All right. Sounds good, guys.